Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you're tuning into this. So, we're going to have another conversation. I just had one that I uploaded, but I wanted to bring this because it's a little bit easier to kind of understand from this lens, a more traditional look. So, we're going to be looking at a mini lecture tied to the student body, actor network theory, Michel Foucault, and the discipline of higher education. So, a question that's on your slide right now, are you here by choice or are you being formed? Most students believe they freely choose their major, right? Their school and their classes. But did they? It's an important question because sociology constantly teaches us to look past the individual decision making and examine the structure, systems, and power. In this class, Tech and Society, we don't take autonomy at face value, right? We interrogate it. That's where actor network theory and Michel Foucault's theory of disciplinary power come in. So, actor network theory helps us map the actors, humans and non humans, that contribute to what we see as personal choice. Your decision to take a class may have been also influenced by advising software, major requirements, tuition payment timelines, your roommate's schedule, or even course reputation on Reddit or professor rating systems on ratemyprofessor.com, right? Actor network theory says these are all actors that assemble your actions. Meanwhile, Michel Foucault pushes us even deeper, right? He argues that institutions like schools, prisons shape our behaviors through routine, subtle form of control, what he calls disciplinary power. We become the kinds of people these institutions need, efficient, trackable, productive. So when you ask yourself if you choose your path, we're also asking how much of what you wanted was shaped by forces that trained you what you want, right? So that's kind of the question there. So we're going to dive into this by looking at the actor network analysis, right? The mapping the actor network, student, professor, parent, university. So actor network theory encourages us to flatten our analyses. Instead of placing humans at the top of the technologies or policy beneath, we need to treat all of them as actors in a network. We've talked about this in class, but these actors include Canvas, Zoom, DegreeWorks, Life 360, you name it, dorm buildings, Wi-Fi infrastructure. Is it dropping? Is it not? The syllabus, the code of conduct, what are GPA requirements, parents, professors, advisors, alumni, and the like. Each of these actors is linked to you in ways that constrain or enable your behavior. So we would look at the actor network theory calls these mediators. They transform your actions. They pass through. For example, a FAFSA deadline isn't just a logistical marker. It shapes your course load, work hours, and perhaps even your major, right? Foucault would look at how this network disciplines the behavior. The calendar becomes a manager. The syllabi becomes a contract. The financial aid offer becomes a gatekeeper. And this is very big right now. What's going on in these current times to think about these types of connections. These aren't violent or overt forms of power per se. They operate through visibility, comparison, and correction. You see your grades, your progress bars, your app notifications, you respond, not just because you want to, but because the system is set up to produce that response, right? And that leads us into our next conversation. How do we look at this Foucauldian lens of disciplinary power? So Foucault argued that the modern world no longer relies on kings and punishment. Instead, it governs through discipline. Institutions control behavior by making people visible, measurable, and correctable. His famous metaphor is the panopticon, a circular prison where inmates never know when they're being watched. So they behave as if they are always being watched, right? They internalize that disciplinary observation, which makes us our own jailers. If that sounds familiar, the university works in much the same way. You don't know who might check your attendance, so you show up, right? Not everyone wants to come to that 9 a.m. class, but what if today's the day, right? I used to have that with my now wife and girlfriend, where we would go to this astronomy class. And if my wife decided not to go, she would give me her clicker. This is way back in the day. And I didn't feel comfortable because what if this was the day that the TAs actually like checked to see if you had two clickers on you? That was a measurement they did in my time, right? You don't know when the assignment might be flagged for plagiarism. So you cite everything, not just because you want to make sure you pay homage to the original author. You're also worried about your own butt being caught and getting in trouble. You track your GPA constantly, not because someone is forcing you, right? Sometimes, but because you've learned to monitor it yourself. Disciplinary power is productive, not just repressive. It doesn't stop you from acting. It teaches you how to act, when, and why. It creates docile bodies, a term Foucault used to describe individuals who are trained to behave efficiently within institutional power structures. Right? You don't just go to college, you become a college student with all the behaviors, fears, and rhythms that come with this identity that you have now established with inside your control, inside your labeling theory, right? That's the power of discipline. So when we look at this power of discipline, we look at this conversation that we're starting. So the myth of the student customer, what is that? I pay tuition, I'm the customer. This is a popular belief among students, especially in a neoliberal university where branding, marketing, and satisfaction surveys dominate the discourse, right? But the actor network theory, Foucault both pushes to reject this simple framing, right? Both actor network theory and Foucault would push us to reject this framing. Actor network would ask, does the customer get to set the rules of the store? No. Your role as a customer is already structured registration systems, curriculum pathways, accreditation bodies, right? You may pay, but you don't control. You are configured by the network to behave in a predictable ways, right? To take certain courses, follow certain rules, and pursue certain post-graduation paths per se. Foucault would say that this is disciplinary masquerading as empowerment, right? You are invited to think of yourself as a customer, but you are judged as a product. How employable are you? What university? What is the metrics that of hiring? What is your degree, right? How well do you fit institutional KPIs or key performance indicators? Are you on track for graduation? Are you, right? You internalize the language of productivity and the ROI or the ROI or the return on investment because the system has trained you to. You measure yourself worth by the rubrics, rankings, and readiness for the labor market you didn't design. This isn't customer freedom, it's subtle coercion dressed up as self-discipline, interestingly, right? So let's look even a little further past the customer myth and let's look at the professors are actors too, right? So students often assume that professorialship or professors or instructors hold absolute authority, but let's break that down with our frameworks. The actor network theory reveals that professors themselves are shaped by the networks, the course templates, the LMSs, right, restrictions, the FERPA policies, the ADA accommodations, the department reviews, and even campus algorithms that flag at-risk teaching behaviors, or organizations on campus, right? In the university here at Arizona State University, there's plenty of times that these on-campus organizations make people feel like they can or can't say things. Turning Point is one. Foucault shows us the professor, like the student, is also a disciplined subject, right? They are evaluated by their students, monitored by their department, audited by the institution, and held accountable to the metrics like the DFW rates, the drop-fail withdrawal, right? Their authority is real, but it is the always mediated and constrained. Professors are both agents of discipline. They give grades, manage the syllabus, sure, and objects of discipline. They're reviewed, surveyed, or surveilled, and corrected, right? Power in the university doesn't flow top down. It circulates, y'all. So when a professor says, you must attend class, they're often just repeating requirements passed to them by the syllabus committee or the registrar or the department policy. The boss is the system. The professor is another cog within this large, large machine. And that's where we can also look at that, how we see becoming a student, right? Becoming a student, or the student as the disciplined body. Let's revisit Foucault's concept of docile body. A docile body is one that is useful, efficient, predictable, and self-monitoring. Does that sound familiar at all? The student is trained to become just that. You learn to show up on time, submit through the correct portal, manage multiple platforms, Canvas, Gmail, Zoom, iClicker here, YellowDig. You have to learn it or else it's not going to allow you to pass the class. And then calculate your GPA as a form of self-worth. Actor network theory, the architecture of that training, right? Apps, calendars, advisors, rubrics. Foucault tells us what this training produces, a subject who doesn't need to be punished because they've already internalized what's the expectation or what's expected. And this discipline goes beyond school. It prepares you for the workplace, where productivity, self-regulation, and optimization are expected. In fact, one could argue that the university is not just preparing you for a quote-unquote job, it's preparing you for obedience within the job, the hidden curriculum, as you learn in sociology. And this is where we also see the next topic here. We see this idea of slide 7, if you're counting, is the University of Disciplinary Institution, right? To the actor network theory, the university is not a single actor, but a black boxed network, a stabilized assemblage of actors that coordinate education. Think of all the layers: learning outcomes, credit hours, attendance policies, student conduct code, Title IX compliance, accreditation standards, and the list continues. Foucault, with his view of this, would say that the university is also a disciplinary institution. It doesn't just hold knowledge, it organizes bodies, it manages time and space and effort through institutional technologies like the semester schedule, right? When do you have your finals? That's posted. I have to follow that. It's not like I can pick my final day. I have to go with what the university mandates. And if I change that, I'm in violation, right? Or have to worry if I get caught, et cetera, et cetera. Degree audits, right? Looking into departments and the audits they have. Office hour expectations held to certain levels of having to hold expectations of engagement. Canvas dashboards, having to make sure that the canvas is up and that I do that in according with everything else. Students have to also understand that. So we see this layered understanding. You are visible to the university in real time. Your grades, attendance, and even Zoom activity can be tracked. You're not untracked, right? What matters is not your inner thought process, but your output, right? The university doesn't want thinkers per se in this example, right? It wants productive students. That is not necessarily evil, but it's worth recognizing. Your behavior is structured by systems of power that don't look at power at all, that don't look like power at all. And this is where we can also see another system that exists, a ghost in the system per se, right? Parents as the remote discipliners or disciplines, right? Parents often are absent from the classroom, not always. Sometimes I've had parents say they weren't going to come if their kids weren't going to get what they wanted, but their power still courses through the system, that I'm aware of it, right? Actor network theory would show the ties as such: tuition payments, insurance forms, FAFSA co-signatures, family portal logins, and what's your major texts? Foucault would focus on the disciplinary effect. Parents often operate as effective surveillance. You may want to make them proud, right? You may fear disappointing them. Their expectations live inside your decision-making 24/7, rent-free. Even the idea of the respectable major or a safe career path is often learned before you arrive on campus and reinforced through the ongoing subtle pressures that are applied. In this sense, your behavior as a student isn't shaped just by the university rules, but imagined by consequences in your family life. You internalize the gaze. You discipline yourself to avoid shame or disapproval, even when it's quote unquote unspoken. And this then leads us to another way that you can be maintained in the power structure, right? Slide that you're on, if you're counting, is 9. This transcript as a disciplinary archive. Yes, your transcript. Your transcript is a product of hundreds of actors, course assignments, registration choices, late night cram sessions, GPA formulas, and of course, curve policies. And many times they used to say when I was a kid, it's going to be put on your public record. I know some high schools that actually pride themselves on tracking people, what college they go to, if they do or don't graduate. That terrifies some of my friends when I hear them say, wait, does my school then calculate if I graduated? Am I held against if I've dropped out or not? You might be, and that may enforce behavior. And actor network theory calls this a black box, a final output whose internal complexity is quite hidden if you're not aware of it right in this situation. Foucault sees it differently. It's a disciplinary archive. It's not just a record. It's an instrument of judgment. It freezes your academic life into legible, rankable, and comparable format. It shows how well you complied, how efficient you were, how normal you became. You might think your transcript reflects you, but it really reflects the legibility to institutions that rely on scores, standards, and performance metrics to make decisions. It becomes a tool that disciplines your future, granting or denying access to further institutions of power, right? If you drop out of college, if you didn't go to a school of a certain ranking, you'll see these divisions that are set. And so for a kind of finalized thought here for you on your slide, we have this kind of look through again at the ANT and the Foucauldian lens in this conversation. So what have we uncovered in this lecture, other than that I talk fast? Well, actor network theory gave us the map of the actors and technologies shaping our educational environment. Foucault gave us the logic of how these structures discipline us through visibility, routine, and normalization. Together, these lenses help us to understand that university life is not just about learning, it's also about formation. You are not just being taught. You are also being organized, ranked, and even socialized into a particular kind of institutional subject. But once you see the machine, you can start thinking differently. Sociology builds this ability to have, as C. Wright Mills says, this sociological imagination. It gives you the tools not to just describe the system, but to question it as well. That's what I want you to do in this course, if you're taking this course, or to be able to learn if you're watching this on another platform. Ask yourself, what behaviors have I accepted as quote unquote normal that are actually institutional scripts? Where do I self-discipline in ways that serve other goals? How might I act differently if I saw these systems for what they are? This isn't about dropping out or rejecting education. It's about seeing the code behind the classroom and asking how you want to engage with it. So please, within inside this course, or if you're watching this on a platform, ask these questions, learn these norms, and understand the systems that surround us. We are surrounded by them, and we can use this lens of disciplinary power. We can use this lens of the actor network theory to be able to see the world in different and more interesting ways every single day. With that, that brings us to the end of this lecture, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.